Hello, my name is Sarah Painter, and I am the 2022 Florida Teacher of the Year. Thank you for allowing me to share my message with you today. It's truly an honor to represent educators from across the entire Sunshine State. As Florida's Teacher of the Year, I not only desire to bring an awareness to our profession, but I also aim to shine a spotlight on the successes across our state. Stories of triumph, resiliency, and defying the odds have been unfolding right before us. It's important to give voice to these stories and to continue to elevate teachers in our profession, because we know that an elevated teacher elevates students. A recognized teacher recognizes students, and a celebrated teacher celebrates students. You know, during a difficult year of learning, teachers in Florida maintained a focus on highest student achievement, working towards closing the gaps, all while continuing to teach rigorous grade level standards. And as we know, last school year started like no other. Instead of beginning the year with 22 new fifth graders staring up at me, eager to start the school year, I was navigating new territory as I taught in person and online at the same time. And when I first started teaching simultaneously last August, I found myself getting frustrated with the technology. You know, my sound would go out, I'd forget to share my screen, kids would drop from the call, and I found myself groaning every single time. So it was about early September, and I was in the middle of my core math lesson. I had 13 students sitting right there in front of me, and 8 were logged in virtually at the same time. Isabella, who had recently been an online student, had just transitioned to face-to-face learning and was now sitting in front of me. So I began to look for volunteers to share their work, and I noticed I had no online students volunteering. And that's when it hit me that for the third time that day, all my online students had dropped from my virtual meeting. When Isabella heard me groan, she wanted to know if this was common. Had I been doing this every time an error occurred with my online students? And it was right then and there, on that September day, that we decided that rather than see the negative, as a class, we would choose to always look for the positive. We would choose to find joy. This mentality followed us around campus. We used it in music, art, PE, and even the cafeteria. You would hear a choral response of find joy anytime we faced discouragement, disappointment, or just needed a reason to celebrate. That's how Find Joy was born. They came up with that 2-word phrase, and they used it to hold me accountable all year. You see, my students taught me that you can't get rid of a negative thought by fighting it. You get rid of it by replacing it. So when I tell you to find joy, know that I'm not giving you a cliche statement. I'm actually charging you to cultivate a mindset that will empower you to face challenges. Because the same boiling water that softens the potato hardens the egg. It's about what you're made of, not the circumstances. Finding joy and modeling how to find joy is actually one way you can advocate for your students to help create a positive learning environment, to nurture success, and to breed gratefulness. You know, one of the most beautiful things about teaching is that no matter what life is like outside of school, you can create an environment that is loving, encouraging, and full of joy inside your classroom doors. You know, you too can find joy with some intentional decisions as you lead and support teachers and students. The language arts teacher in me couldn't wait to take the word joy and build an acrostic poem out of it. Our first letter is J, which stands for join with others. One way teachers can find joy is by joining with others. And when I say join with others, I mean build those relationships with your colleagues, administrators, support staff, students, both those in your class and beyond, and with their families. You know, every year as a 5th grade teacher, I go out of my way to interact with the students in the grade level below mine, including requesting hallway duty outside the 4th grade classrooms. That way I can build relationships with my future students. According to the Center for Child Counseling, just one stable, positive adult relationship can dramatically impact a child's mental health and well-being, as well as be a key factor in a child's resilience, which can lead to student success. So a few years ago, I did just this, and I bonded with a particular 4th grade class. There were several boys that year who brought many challenges to their classrooms. So each week I sat outside their room where they were lined up along the wall. We just sat and chatted. One student in particular stands out in my mind. His name was Cedric. You know, Cedric enjoyed his bad boy reputation with his classmates. He consistently liked to draw attention to himself, and he was a very energetic and active child. During my time building relationships with the 4th grade students in the hallway each morning, I discovered that Cedric loved to draw, and he was a huge YouTube fan. Well, it didn't take long for me to also find out that he was extremely proficient at math, as I watched him complete his weekly lessons with ease each morning before class. Some of the other students also zipped through their morning lessons. I wanted to see what their capabilities were, so I would challenge them with more complicated math equations each morning. I noticed that Cedric would complete the equations, but he didn't want the other students to see how smart he was, so he would hide it. Well, I was excited when the following year Cedric appeared on my roster. By joining with him, and many of the other students when they were in 4th grade, I was actually able to dig into the academics more quickly, in particular with math. I'd plan an enrichment task that I knew would challenge him and the other students who were ready for above grade level work. And to keep it engaging for Cedric, I'd often ask him to share with me what was trending on YouTube so I could pair that content into my math word problems while also adhering to the standard. I knew that Cedric had so much potential academically and as a leader. He was incredibly talented, but not only in math, with technology as well. So with this knowledge, I encouraged him to join the TV news production team. He didn't want to be in front of a camera because that wasn't considered cool, but he was definitely a natural behind the scenes, running the control panel board, and he quickly earned a leadership position on the production team as head operator. By the end of that school year, Cedric not only shined in his leadership position on the TV news team, but he also made more than 1 year of growth as measured by our statewide math assessment. In fact, our trend data indicated that based on his previous scores, students who scored like him in 4th grade would have a median growth of 8 points in 5th grade. However, Cedric grew by 21 points that year in math. And I know that the success of Cedric and the other students in my class was directly related to the knowledge that I gained by joining with them early to form an authentic relationship. Our next letter in our mission to find joy is O, which stands for ownership. Own your data. Empower yourself, your students, and their families to own their data, and then use this data to accelerate the learning in your schools. So I'm a runner, and I belong to a community of runners. And you want to know something? There isn't a one of us that participates in a race, crosses the finish line, and says, nah, I'm good, I don't need to know my time. Because knowing your time when you cross the line helps you analyze if your training plan worked, if the techniques you tried throughout the year paid off. It also situates your outcomes among the other runners. And the same is true of teaching. Our student outcome data, as well as reflecting on our practice, helps us determine what we did well and helps us identify areas we need to improve. You know, I learned how to own my data a few years ago, which led to me becoming what I call data hungry. It was like the more numbers I knew, the more I craved. And after seeing the power of owning my data, I was inspired to empower my students to own their data too. You know, when students are taught to own their numbers and know where they stand with their data, it paves the way for relevant goal setting, which can then lead to a closer alignment between goals and student achievement. But it doesn't just stop there. I also empower my parents to own their child's data. I created a parent involvement night a few years ago, and to prepare for this evening, I compiled individual folders for each parent containing current reading data specific to their child. And after the parents review the data, they would choose an area to focus on based on their child's data. And then within cohorts, parents work together to create an intervention to try with their child in the area that they identified as needing improvement. Rather than giving the resource, I wanted parents to have an opportunity to create an activity that was both relevant and doable for their child. So for example, one year I worked with a grandmother, her name was Cheryl, who was raising her granddaughter, Takaya. Takaya was a tall, mature, confident girl with a big personality. She was a cheerleader and was very social with the other students in her grade level. Takaya excelled at math and science, but she did struggle in ELA. In fact, she was embarrassed about her reading level, and she didn't want the other students to see her struggle. When it was time for ELA each day, I noticed that this usually loud and confident child became meek and avoided eye contact. During our event that year, Takaya's grandmother dug into the data, and she identified reading fluency as an opportunity for growth. Cheryl shared some of Takaya's interest, including her love for YouTube videos. And so that evening, she decided to combine Takaya's love for YouTube with the goal to increase her reading fluency. Cheryl chose to use the closed captions feature to have Takaya read the words aloud as she watched her favorite videos. And as they implemented this new strategy at home, you could just see the growth Takaya was making reflected in our progress monitoring assessments. And as her reading fluency increased, her confidence grew as well. She started to volunteer to read aloud and participate in class more and more. So how did this play out for Takaya in regard to student achievement? Well, Takaya would later go on to score a level 5 on the statewide science assessment, which is the highest level achievable, all due to her increased fluency skills. And not only a level 5, Takaya got a perfect score. And if you've never seen these sample test items, that science assessment is truly a reading test. You know, I recently texted with Takaya. She's now a junior in high school, enrolled in Honors English, Honors Algebra 2, as well as 2 college-level science courses, physics and forensic science. You see, ownership for educators goes beyond ourselves and even beyond our teaching practice. True ownership expands to our students, their families, and their outcomes, and using this ownership to accelerate learning. When we empower ourselves, our students, and their families to take ownership, we can choose to find joy in the improved outcomes, just like Takaya and her grandmother did. And that brings us to our last letter, which is Y. That stands for the word yet. There's so much power in that 3-letter word. Wrapped up in that one tiny word is a premise that we all have the ability to improve. When I think of the power of yet, I think of Skyla. Skyla entered my classroom as an energetic student who lacked confidence in her academic abilities, especially when it came to math. I even noticed her body language would change when we began our core math lesson. Her reactions told me that she felt she was not good at math and that she couldn't improve. I knew I needed to change that perspective and help her see that we all have struggles but have the ability to improve. So with this in mind, I intentionally began to model how I would approach different math word problems during my instruction. In fact, I would narrate my thought process aloud, focusing on trial and error as I solved the problems, not getting the answer correct yet. I would say, oh, that digit is in the tens place. I thought it was in the ones place. Let me go back and try that again. Or this problem's asking me to do something new. Multiply a 3-digit number by a 2-digit number. I wonder if I can use the skill I know from multiplying 2 by 2-digit numbers to help. And as I continued to model how to persevere through the challenge of solving new or difficult problems, I could just see Skyla perk up. She would hang on to every word. I continued to point out how I would approach a problem, find difficulty solving it, brainstorm ways to overcome the challenge, and ultimately learn what to do the next time. And you know, it didn't take long for Skyla to exhibit the same behaviors. While working through a challenging problem, it wouldn't be uncommon to hear her say, I just can't seem to get the answer yet, but I'll keep trying, Mrs. Painter. Wouldn't you know that that young lady increased from the lowest 25% of 5th graders at the beginning of the year to later outperform 50% of all 5th grade students by winter break. Not only did Skyla grow academically, her confidence in math and herself grew. While finishing off the year virtually that year, she developed and led the Collaboration Corner, an online math discussion group for her classmates. The Collaboration Corner provided an opportunity for students to come together during a time where many felt alone to talk through the math lessons, discussing the strategies they were using, and the challenges they were facing. Skyla did not let her struggles in math defeat her. She truly used the power of yet to improve her abilities, but also the abilities of her classmates. Just like Skyla, we can choose to find joy as we focus on the power of yet to help us persevere and turn challenges into learning opportunities. So what can you, as educators, as leaders, do to help find joy for yourselves and those around you? Model how to join with others. Demonstrate how to own your practice and live out the power of yet. So I stated earlier I'm a runner. It basically started as a way to get me time. As a mom of 6 kids, there aren't many activities I do which allow me to have some alone time, to refresh, to rejuvenate, to be the best Sarah that I can be, to be the best mom, the best teacher that I can be. My children want to come with me everywhere, until one day when I said that I was going for a run. Crickets. The rest is history. Running did eventually evolve into a passion for me. And as I'm out running, I'm often thinking about how to use my running experiences as analogies in the classroom. For example, I may have to work late, and my run gets pushed back later than I intended. So the next day I tell my students the story, and I end it with, sometimes in life you can't plan how things will go, but you still show up. Or maybe I'm running and my shoelace comes untied and I have to stop to tie it. The next day's story may sound like, sometimes in life your plans get interrupted, but you address the problem, then you pick right up where you left off. But you know what? One day I stumbled upon the perfect analogy that was applicable to both my students and my colleagues. Here's how it happened. Sometimes it begins to rain right before I go out for a run, and I know I could just skip my run that day. But if you know me at all, you know that if I've decided to do something, once I've made that commitment, there really isn't much that's going to stop me from doing it. Because I love running, and running brings me joy. So despite rain, I go out there and I run. Why? Because my passion wasn't altered when the weather turned. My dedication didn't change. My mission didn't waver. I'm a runner, and I made a decision to run every day, a commitment to be a runner. I find joy in running, regardless of the weather. Yes, I will have to wipe my eyes while running. Yes, my clothes will get wet and start to feel heavy, and yes, I may have to step into some puddles. But you want to know what the quickest way is to get out of a dirty, muddy puddle that I didn't create, that just happens to be in my way, that I don't want to stay in? Well, it's not to stand in the middle of the puddle and find others who equally hate the puddle and talk about it. It's not to take a selfie with the puddle and complain about it on social media. It's to keep running. That's right, the quickest way to get out of the puddle is to run through it. Will I get wet? Sure. Will I get dirty? Absolutely. Will it be comfortable? Let me ask you, have you ever tried to run in wet pants? You see, a change in weather did not make me any less of a runner. It didn't change my mission. It didn't steal my joy. And the same is true of teaching. We may find ourselves in circumstances that feel messy, that feel out of control, that we don't want to stay in. So let's choose to find joy. The outlook we have when facing a challenge determines how we perceive it. We get to choose that. When running in the rain, dirty, and with wet pants, I remember to choose to find joy and embrace the challenge. If I've learned anything while teaching through a pandemic, it's that teaching is an act of service. And when you're called to serve others, things like circumstances can't stand in your way. We are called to serve students, period. There's no clause in our contract that has an asterisk next to it that says serve students unless you're in a global pandemic, or serve students unless half of your class is home in quarantine. Because we know that our work is for the greater good. It goes beyond your classroom walls, beyond your impact on just students. And it's also about your impact in the teaching community as well. And before you say, well, I'm just one person, I don't make that much of a difference, remember that for every teacher you positively influence, there's a room full of students behind them. I love being a teacher. I'm proud to be a teacher, and I find joy in being a teacher. Why? Because I have the privilege of impacting students' lives each and every day. Let's choose to find joy in the coming days. As you're leading, teaching, and supporting this year, if a fire alarm disrupts your lesson, if a new student joins your class 2 days before the state assessment, if your technology malfunctions at 9 a.m., you can choose to find joy. There have always been challenges in the classroom, and there always will be challenges. But let's choose to view these challenges as opportunities for growth, to positively impact our teachers and their students, and to model for them how to persevere, and that they too can overcome any obstacles they face. To do this, remember, join with others like I joined with Cedric. Own your data like Takaya and her grandmother, and hold on to the power of yet just like Skyla. Find joy, because the best thing about being a teacher is that it matters, but the hardest thing about being a teacher is that it matters every day.